Good afternoon, everyone. I'm your moderator today. My name is Davey, and welcome to this event. The event is called The Artist Talk, The Ocean Politics in the Artwork, Nodal Narratives of the Deep Sea. And this is one of the public events from the actual exhibition happening in the venue in the Science and Technology Building. The name of the exhibition is Convergence. So today, other with the main sharer, the artist Aarti Sunder, we also have the discussant, which is also the exhibition curator for this event. The name of the curator is Ji Bohao. So I'll let Bohao to talk a bit as an opening. So let's welcome Bohao.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this special session. And this exhibition, Convergence, aims to unite diverse artists and technologists who use their unique mediums to explore and challenge our understanding of the world. So when discussing like tech art or new media art, we usually think of our work created with cutting-edge tools, offering sensory-rich experiences. But in this event, we aim to showcase a broader spectrum in the exhibition and our accompanied events. Through the lens of artists, we hope to introduce not only the benefits and potentials of emerging technologies, but also the invisible infrastructure and impacts they carry. Moreover, we hope to reveal how those technologies embedded in our daily lives, those that may no longer seem exciting, continue to shape and influence the world we often take for granted through artist practice. So to extend this idea, we have invited artist Aarti Sunder to share her practice with us today. We also encourage everyone to share your perspectives throughout this session. So now I am pleased to introduce today's speaker, Aarti Sunder. Aarti Sunder is an artist who lives and works in India. She works with video, writing, and drawing, and she's interested in how technology affects politics and society. Her works examine various aspects of infrastructure, including modern labor practices, the imaginative aspects of protest, the interaction between digital and physical worlds, and the broader implications of digital platforms. And Aarti and I were part of the same cohort at MIT, where we collaborated on several projects, including field trips, independent press with visual printing, 3D scanning, and services from a swarm to a nuclear plant. So it's lovely for me to reconnect and engage with Aarti in this setting. Today, Aarti will share her project, Nodal Narratives of the Deep Sea, which investigates the hidden infrastructure of submarine cables and their complex connection with ecological and geopolitical systems. She will also showcase segments from her video works, as well as various images and storytelling elements, and her unique perspectives on understanding infrastructure. So now please join me in welcoming Aarti Sunder. Aarti.
Thank you, Bohao. Thank you, Devi. Oh my God, thank you I'm really happy to be here. I must admit I'm a little nervous, so if I talk a bit fast, please let me know to slow down, and I will repeat everything I have to. If something didn't, set well, or you didn't understand something, just let me know, and I'll be happy to repeat myself. And please, if you want to actually ask questions in between, that would be perfect. It can be as informal as possible, so that I don't feel like I'm just hearing myself, like you just hear yourself talk all the time and you're like, I'm the only one talking.
Yeah.
Cool. So, I mean, I can quickly jump into it. And I hope you all saw the installation that is up in the science building. And just to give you an idea as to how I got to that, I want to just backtrack a little bit and focus on two projects which I did. I'll speak about the first one in very brief detail. There are two clips to look at, and after that there is another project on platform gig labor, which I will slightly open out so that you understand why I'm constructing the stories the way I do and what I hope to achieve with it. Like, what is at stake here? Why am I doing what I'm doing? So I think I'm trying to answer that question in this 1 hour. So, I mean, if I don't get there, we can maybe through your questions get there. And if I get there, good for me. So if we can just jump into the first two segments of video.
Yeah.
I'll just quickly give you one sentence. So basically, I was in Dubai when I was I encountered the story, which is half real and half not real. I mean, I fictionalized it a little bit. And the reason I just want to tell you the reason I'm bringing this to you right now is because I want to ask you to focus when you listen to it, to think about why do you bring individual stories to the fore? Why do you bring a story of a particular person in a completely different context, in a completely different space, living a completely different life? Why does anyone bring such a story to the table? And what does the person hope to gain, from telling somebody else the story? And for me, the reason which I mean, I will also expand on it, but this kind of experiential story carries with it an entire infrastructure of how certain experiences are constructed for the person and where they come from. And they don't come out of thin air. They come because of a whole set of socio-political and economical frameworks that are put into place, whether accidentally or not, or you choose something or something's chosen for you. And it's in telling of these stories that we can draw these connections out so that they are poetic as well as they are informative, and they're also extremely real. These are not, as much as you make things up, they come from a space of extreme materiality, right? So we can just jump into the playing of these two segments now. I'll mute myself.
அவனுக்கு 20 வயசு. மீன் காட்சியகத்தில் 2 வருடமாக வேலை செய்கிறான். வீட்டுக்கு காசு அனுப்பணுமென்று 4 வருஷத்துக்கு முன்னர் கள்ள ஐடி அடிச்சு யூஏ போயிட்டான். அவன்ட வேலை என்னென்றால் கிட்டத்தட்ட 15 மணித்தியாலமாக நின்று கொண்டு இருக்கணும். பிரேக் ஒன்றும் பெருசாக கிடையாது. அதுவும் சிசிடிவி. அவன் கொஞ்சம் சோம்பினாலும் மடம்ல இருந்து நல்ல சத்தம் வரும். பார்த்தேன்டால் அவனுக்கு சரியா அழுத்து போச்சு. அது மீறி வீட்டு ஆசையும் தாங்க முடியல. ஆனால் இதெல்லாம் வீட்டுக்கு எப்படி சொல்லுவானா? அவையெல்லாம் பயங்கர கவலைப்பட வேணும். ஆனால் எப்படி பார்த்தாலும் அவைகளுக்கு இந்த காசும் தேவை. இந்த வேலை மூலமாக ஒரு குறிப்பிட்ட மீனை பற்றி நிறைய தெரிஞ்சு வச்சிருக்கிறான். அதுக்கு எப்பப்ப வருத்தம் என்றெல்லாம் அவனுக்கு சொல்ல தெரியும். உண்மையா சொல்ல வேண்டால் அவனுக்கு நல்லா தெரியும் இந்த மீனின்ற வாழ்க்கைக்கும் அவன் வாழ்க்கைக்கும் ஒரு ஆழ்ந்த தொடர்பு ஒன்று இருக்குதுண்டு. இந்த மீன்கள் எல்லாம் பயங்கர ஸ்ட்ரெஸ்ல இருக்கும். சண்டை போடுவினம், படபட என்று நீந்த கொண்டிருப்பினம். ஆனா சில நேரம் அப்படியே அசையாம இருக்கணும். தொல்லையா பார்க்க தெரியும் இந்த மீனுக்கு வருத்தமான்ட்டு. சில நேரம் இதெல்லாம் தாங்க முடியாம இந்த டேங்க்ல இருந்தே குடிக்க பார்க்கும். வெளியே இருக்கிற தண்ணீர் அமைதியா இருக்குமோ என்னவோ என்று. ஆனா அந்த நெருக்கிற தரையோட மோதினால்தான் தெரியும் அதுக்கு. அவன் வேலையில முக்கியமாக விடியல வந்து இப்படி செத்து கிடக்கிற மீன்களை எடுத்து எறிகிறது தான். அந்த மீன்களுக்கு பைத்தியம் என்று இவனுக்கு வடிவா தெரியும். நானும் இந்த மீன் மாதிரிதான் என்று சொல்றான்.
We can jump to the second clip.
அவையெல்லாம் சும்மா அறையிற விட அந்த மீன்கள் எடுத்து கழுவி காய வச்சு சேமத்தெல்லாம் வச்சு நான் இப்போ எனக்கு நிறைய மீன் பகுதிகளோட குட்டி குட்டி பெட்டியல் இருக்கு. இம்மெல்லாம் என் தொழில் கருவியல் இல்லோ, அதனால நான் அவையெல்லாம் நல்லா பார்த்து கொள்ளணும். பார்த்தியோ எவ்வளோ கருவியல் என்று? சொன்னான் தானே இந்த மீன்களுக்கும் எனக்கு ஒரு தொடர்பு இருக்கு என்று. அவையில் இப்படியெல்லாம் சும்மா செத்து கிடக்கணும் என்று நான் விரும்பலை. ஆனால் இப்போ அவள் செத்த பின்னால் அவளுடைய சாபம் வீணாக இருக்க கூடாதல்லோ. அதனால நான் அவையில பயன்படுத்துகிறேன். என்ன பயன்படுத்துகிறேன்? ஏதாவது ஒன்று அமைக்கிறேன். எவ்வளோ சேர்ந்து பகிர்ந்தோம், துன்பங்கள், துயரங்கள். ஆனால் சந்தோஷங்களும் பகிர்ந்தோம், இல்லைன்று இல்லை. நான் நினைக்கிறேன் ஒரு வகையில் நாங்கள் ஒன்றாக தான் வேலை செய்தோம் என்று. எந்த வேலை அவையில பார்க்கறது, அவையில எந்த வேலை உயிரோடு இருக்கிறது. தனியாக உயிரோடு இருக்கிறது எப்படி சொல்லி கொடுக்கறது? சில நேரம் நாங்கள் தான் எங்களை வேலையை ஒழுங்காக செய்யலையோ. ஒரு நாள் இந்த மீன் பாதை எல்லாம் எடுத்து ஏதாவது ஒரு வகையில் பாவிக்கணும் என்று நான் விரும்புகிறேன். சில நேரம் ஏதாவது ஒரு பயனுள்ளதாக உருவாக்கலாமோ தெரியா, என்னென்று தெரியா. பயனென்றாலும் உண்மையா என்ன, என்னோட சும்மா கதைச்சுட்டு இருக்கிறதுக்காக என்னென்று தெரியா. ஆனால் விரைவில் இது திருப்பி ஏதாவது ஒன்றாக வரும். ஒரு நாள் நீயும் பார்ப்ப.
I think we can cut the video if that's okay. Or we can keep it running. I mean, it's done anyway. So this was two clips of a larger work which, I mean, if you're interested, I can send you a link. That's not at all an issue. And so basically, I'd met this person and he told me this story and it really moved me. And I went on to sort of construct the rest of the story as I thought it would complete itself or play itself out. And in my attempt to complete that story was born this kind of how do you encounter something that is much larger, but that in terms of a socio-political and economic climate, but that very that affects you in an extremely real manner. And if we look back into our own lives, for instance, there have been many instances where you really something really moves you, or you feel tired, or you feel angry, or you feel something about something that has happened. And I think at any given point, if you were to stop yourself and ask, where do you think what I am feeling comes from? Yes, it maybe comes from, I know, your ice cream fell off the road or whatever. It could be anything. But in that investigation and in kind of thinking about where, to go a little deeper, go lift the veil a little bit more, remove a few smoke screens and foggy kind of meshes maybe, and then you will very soon come upon the infrastructure of what allows certain things to be. And in that, I think, is where my investigation lies and my interests lie, in trying to find where does the infrastructure meet the person in an everyday, in an instance of extreme emotion or feeling or experience, or a situation which you have encountered, you don't know what to do with, or you know what to do with, or whatever it is, right? And so I wanted to bring this up so that we can begin on this note, right? To think about what exactly then is infrastructure. It is something outside of yourself, yes, but it affects you in a very real way. How do you notice it? And it doesn't, you don't have to necessarily notice it only when, your electricity gets cut, or, you don't have internet, or your phone breaks, or whatever it is. You can find it in every other space as well, if you were to really look and ask the right questions. And I guess, one of the most difficult things for me is to come upon what the right questions are, which we will, I suppose, figure out over the course of the hour. That it's the most exciting thing for me. So, so I wanted to bring this up because it's how I work, and also, so this particular investigation was on rideshare, was predominantly on rideshare workers in the US, in Dubai, in the UAE, but it was also about the nature of labor in the UAE. When you go somewhere else and you work, and you come back home, what does it mean? What does it mean to go somewhere else and work? And but it's also independent of that. What does it mean to be functional regardless of what? Anything in the world that happens to you, You're supposed to go to work, finish your work, come back home. Go to work, finish work, come back home. What does that mean? Why do we continue doing it? So it's just a meditation on what that might look like. So from here, I'm going to show you 2 more clips. Please let me know if I'm overshooting time, because we have quite a bit to go. And it's already 12:50. But
Yeah, I think it's all good.
It's all good. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but do let me know. Yeah, please. Okay, good. So the next 2 clips you're going to see are from a work called Ghost Cut, Some Clear Pixels Amongst Many Black Boxes. And basically, I'll just give you a very short introduction to what the project, on what the investigation was, what my research was. Not too much, because I'll talk about it a little later as well. So when I was in the research institution along with POHAW, I came across a lot of very serious academic, qualitative and quantitative researchers who were relying on online material, online data sets in order to complete their sort of work, their research, and to take forward a lot of the ideas that I think are super, super interesting, super important. But in just asking very foolish, silly, over the top questions, what is this, what is that, I came to the understanding that not many people knew where this information was coming from and what was at stake over here. Because for me, it was screaming at me, saying that, what exactly, who are these people giving you all this information? Like, how are you getting this information? What is this access that you have? And in being in the US, I think it helps because your geolocation helps you unlock a few of these platforms which you cannot do in other places, which I'm sure you very well know. Being in India also, I very well know all these things. So being physically sitting in the US really helps. So I was able to conduct this research looking into the Mechanical Turk platform, which is run by Amazon. It's one of the most notorious online scalar gig-based platforms for data set gathering and annotation and any kind of, let's say, digital menial task that you want to get done. Doesn't necessarily have to be only digital. It can also be, recognition. It can be translations. It can be say making something digital to analog to digital. It can be a whole lot of things. Go out, get information, come back. It can be a whole host of material that you can source. I have a feeling you guys know what MTurk is. Maybe I don't need to explain myself. Do I need to say anything? Because if you know, then I'll just be telling you what you already know, which I don't need to.
Yeah, maybe we could just jump into
Yeah.
screening part, and also Bohal has already shared the link of your work introduction in Mandarin, so I think that helps the audience too. Yeah.
Okay, then let's just jump into it. And yeah, if there are questions, please ask me, because then I feel like I'm just repeating myself when you guys already know everything, and then that's it just feel a little weird.
No.
Okay, cool, thanks.
हाय, ये मेरा अमेजोन मैकेनिकल टर्क में काम करने का ये पर्सनल कंप्यूटर, ये कीबोर्ड और माउस है। ये देख सकते हैं आप, ये मैकेनिकल टर्क ओपन है। इसमें आपका हिप भी ओपन किया है मैंने, देख सकते हैं आप। ये राउटर, एक दूसरा पीसी है, मेरे हस्बैंड काम करते हैं। ये विंडो है, ये उस तरफ किचन एरिया है, ये बेडरूम का डोर है, ये हॉल है जहाँ मैं काम करती हूँ। मेरी डॉटर, ये अमेजोन के बॉक्स से हम amazon.in में सेलिंग भी करते हैं। ये फ्रंट डोर है, घर का दरवाजा। ये प्रिंटर है और ये मेरा वर्क स्टेशन है। Thank you.
I think of it as freelancing. Like it provides a platform to us between those who want work and those who do work.
I would define myself as a paid contractor. Independent contractor. Independent, that's right.
My role is to, of course, number one, give answers that AI has not advanced to the point there would be much trust in AI. Because by far most of the questions I'm asking them are my opinion. They want me to rate how I feel about certain people or groups. Not very much of it is. cognitive tasks like adding numbers. It's mainly giving opinions so they can eventually get a consensus from MTech workers so they know what to program into AI. Once they get more and more detailed information to how humans behave, that way AI can mimic humans better over time. And that's sort of what MTech does.
MTech can be divided into two kinds of work. One is surveys and the other is this data entry kind of work that could include audio transcription and all, converting these PDFs or pictures to Word files or something of that sort. Surveys, as the customers are mostly from the US and North America side, so they set a demographic filter that they get workers from that side. So we don't get that kind of work, but that's the lucrative part. This is more of a what we say, less thinking and more doing kind of work.
Yeah, we can go to the second part of the video, and then I will just briefly give you an overview.
So, something happened in the August of 2018 that changed the way MTech benefits us, mostly people who work outside of the US. A US-based university researcher posted a question on a social psychology Facebook page asking if anyone had noticed a drop in the quality of work on MTech. The question was, is the low quality of work a result of bots, or is it because of badly performing workers? The post got a lot of interest since a lot of academics rely on the MTech platform to conduct their research. It's scary, someone replied. But what was scary exactly? Is it the possibility that numerous studies, surveys, image annotation, and programming tasks meant for humans are instead being done by bots? And if so, how can the scale of this error be determined? Or is it that the humans are being confused for bots? Or is it that MTech is designed to employ worn-out workers who maybe sometimes make mistakes? Or is it scary that it is nearly impossible to backtrack and determine where the errors were? Now, any of these situations calls into question the accuracy of the data collected. The first set of responses are very interesting. It begins with this sarcastic question of whether whoever and whatever is responding to questions on MTech is affected by heat. And someone suggests that a machine is responding to surveys, while another commenter suggests that it is a summer heat thing. And suddenly the questions shift to whether bots are responsive to heat or not, or are MTech workers sensitive to weather, or MTech workers humans or bots, or are they a curious mix of both? That would be really scary, someone wrote. So by now it is evident that some researchers are deeply concerned. Then someone explicitly asks if the data quality on MTech is sensitive to seasons. So is it? Is data alive? It can be argued that data is not alive in the way living beings are. It cannot respond to changing weather patterns in the way living beings do. But since data sets gathered are dependent on either the living being who gathers it or the infrastructure that requires weather resistance, monitoring, maintenance, it is quite fair to ask if data is sensitive to weather changing patterns. Then the question becomes whether humans are affected by the weather. Should anyone be affected by the weather at all anymore? Someone commented that certain things in real life can affect the results we get. For example, if it is raining, if it is hot, natural disasters, etc. Someone else said that with an online, uncontrolled environment, anything is possible really. Could be that completely different sorts of people take the study depending on seasons, time of day, etc. One of the trade-offs for the convenience of MTech. So here, control and uncontrol are very interesting words when it comes to platform-based online gig work in spaces like MTech. Firstly, in terms of work, uncontrol is used here to define the type of people who do the tasks and when they do it and under what conditions they're doing it. And none of these can be determined or controlled. Uncontrolled can also be used to refer to payment methods on the platform. There is no minimum fee for this labor. In fact, sometimes there is no payment at all for these tasks. it could also mean the excessively controlled interface of MTurk for both requesters and workers. The platform is designed so that there is little or no recourse to human management, so to speak. The platform is your manager, enforcer, and arbiter of rules. So, when another commenter states that anything is possible in an online uncontrolled environment, what is actually being referred to is the way in which different levels of platform-based opacity interact with each other. And depending on who is looking and from where, the gradient of that opacity alters, moves, or overlaps with its online and offline surroundings differently. No. So, going back to the question of seasons, weather, or temperature affecting data, it is tempting to say yes. But this is precisely the success of the platform. To even ask the question means that the figure of the human is so abstracted that it is hard to determine anything about them, even whether they are breathing or not.
Hi, this is my system.
Yeah. So what you saw in these two clips actually was, this is again just about 8 minutes of a video work, which basically charts out the entire investigation that I went through in order to understand, what is happening in this kind of scalar platform network. And as you can actually, in the beginning, those images are already super dated. They already, when you look at it, they're like, this looks easily 6-7 years old. And you're right. It is dated. This is like 2002, not even 6-7. It's like barely 5-6 years old. And that is the rate at which image annotation and image recognition is taking place at the moment. So imagine the speed at which it's happening. So, but the point is that it is dated, but in terms of what you see as an image, but I think the underlying processes are still the same, which is you still need a whole bunch of people doing this kind of annotative work in order to give you information about whatever you ask, whatever you seek. Everything must be computable. What does it mean to be computable? And I'm just taking a look at this question. So the interviews in the beginning, the way I went about doing the project was I had to contact a whole bunch of workers between the US and India. US because I was in the US, and India because I am Indian. So there is, I can work with different languages for one. And also a lot of the labor comes from India, Nigeria, and the US and Indonesia. So the thing is, these are also former colonies, India, Nigeria, Indonesia. So there's a fair amount of English already being used in these spaces. So there's no excessive learning cost. Of course, there is, which is not to say everyone knows English. It's a huge misunderstanding if people think that. But there is a fair amount. And given our population, it's quite a lot. So the point, so I did these really large, sort of large in the sense of number of people. It is a fair amount. For me, large is about 30-40 people I spoke to. Very open-ended interviews where I would ask them how they went about the day, what they did, what they thought, why are they doing their work, what do they think of themselves, anything. What do you eat? How do you sleep? Where do you sleep? Where are you working? What computer do you have? Everything. And there was no question that was off the table unless it was personal. Unless it infringed on some kind of space which they did not want to get into. And of course, they were paid interviews. I was given permission to use it, all of that. It was vetted, all of that. So, and then I edited it to form a narrative, which sort of told the story of what MTurk does. And before we get into the image up above, I just want to focus on the last bit, because I think that's crucial to the project, the Nodal Narratives project on the deep sea cables. So that is what you see as an image on screen is a convection cell experiment, which basically tells you how weather patterns move in any space. It's a convection cell. So in any space, you have small convection cells, or larger, and much larger. So basically water, there is, not water, sorry, there is cold particles and the heat and hotter particles. The humid filled particles sort of condense, and the heat sort of rises, and then it sort of becomes cool again, percolates, saturates, goes. It's just a circle of weather. It's just the very basics. You have all studied in geography. You just don't remember it, I think. So in class 10, they teach you all this kind of thing. So so the reason I use that as a way to explain weather was because the entire conversation that I had chanced upon, which is still available on Facebook, it's been archived, is because they were, for the first time, you see a whole bunch of extremely professional, and these researchers have been working for years, in their fields. They're very, I don't know what well known, but they seem to be knowing what they're doing. But for the first time, I'm realizing that there are actually people doing work for you, and maybe, just maybe, wherever they're sitting, they're obviously sitting somewhere else, wherever they are sitting, they are the weather is affecting them. And sorry, my video just went away. But and weather is affecting them. And to think that anthropologists or academics don't realize that weather affects people who are giving you information is a very, very sort of a strange predicament to be in. And when you see that they realize it, there's a certain sense of panic, and a whole bunch of information is now called into question. And I was super interested in that as a way to understand what friction is, and I'm going to get into that. Maybe we don't, I'm going to very quickly go into this image before we come back into friction, because the M-Turk sort of, the mechanical Turk came from this also actually really looks at friction, came from this mid-century automaton from Austria-Hungary, which was this huge chess player, which was this object that is meant to be a theatrical object, where it was storing, and the person who made it with this guy called Kemplin had basically said that, we've passed the Turing test, and we've come up with, this robot, which is more human than human itself, kind of thing. And it could play a very good game of chess. It would win, it would lose, depending on, there was no way to determine what are the patterns. There was very little understanding on what exactly was happening, and people were just really thrilled. You have this machinic object, which is now human. And over time, people realized it was, of course, it was almost nearly 75 to 80 years later, they realized that, there was somebody sitting underneath manipulating the coins from beneath, using a magnetic sort of, the chessboard is magnetic. And so this is also how M-Turk works, which is that it's meant to, in all its irony, it's meant to function as this object, which has somebody sitting underneath and, doing all the work. So these 80s cartoons where you have this machine and then somebody is sitting inside and manipulating it, sort of, it's not out of the world. It's not a complete anomaly. It's coming from somewhere. And I just want to bring that in order to very quickly understand what M-Turk is, in case you didn't know. But going back to friction, what was the last few bits that you saw was the last 4 minutes of this video that you saw, which relied on this weather pattern and how people were realizing that people are somewhere else sitting and working, is I think it speaks to it's a very black and white sort of in your face understanding of what friction is, which is that it resists, it impedes, it stops, it stutters. It is not that data flows. Data is always sort of in, takes 1 step forward, 3 steps back, 2 steps forward, 4 steps back, or maybe 10 steps forward, 1 step back kind of. It's always going up and down in such a way that you need to sort of focus on where these sputters are happening or where these glitches take place. And in these spaces is where you find actually a lot of information on the history of infrastructure or on the history of that particular situation, where something is coming from, why is certain something built in its particular way. So when you come to, for instance, then we're going to just jump into nodal narratives because I'm already at, I only have 20 minutes more. Maybe you can overshoot, I know, but I don't want to take up too much time. Is in the nodal narratives project, one of the reasons I got to it also was the thing with this MTurk thing was that yes, data is subjective. In the beginning, you see this woman speaking about, this is my computer, and you see this really weird image, and then you have that section, and then right after you have like this text, this prescriptive text happening, and that was the initial stages of prescriptive text, and you can already see the kinds of errors taking place, and it is not too far-fetched to believe that the people who are speaking, that is the person who was speaking, had some kind of role to play in the making of the data set that allowed that text to play out, allowed that app to sort of allow someone else to speak and then have the text sort of appearing in front of you. So these are like sort of loops that you're constantly placed in, while even say during captures, there is a loop that takes place, multiple loops that you're already sort of invested in. And in nodal narratives, it was a lot of these loops that I tried to, I had questions about, which I had to sort of try to find a way to untangle, which was, yes, okay, fine, data is subjective, it has all these things, it's got friction, it's this, it's that, it's all of this, it's very important, it's also very problematic, it's all these things, but how does it go from one place to other? Yes, it's flashes of light, but what does it mean? What does it actually mean? How does it go? And that was when I started studying the infrastructure of the internet itself, where you, of course, you have these deep sea cables, but then where did they come from? And that is when we jump, if you can jump into that cables map, which is image 6, I think you have to skip one image after this and it's the image after that.
So we'll let Ting to switch to page 6.
Yeah, this is the image. So this is, if you just Google it, this is what you see. This is what you get. It's what everyone sees. And it's a very simple, friction-free map of how cables have been laid out. And it is what it is. It looks exactly like this. It is as crow flies. It's supposed to be the shortest distance from place to place. And that's how information travels, right? The shorter the distance, the faster it goes. It's as simple as that. And but this is a very curious image. Like, this cannot be it. This doesn't make sense, really. Like, what does this actually mean? It's super abstract. It's super informative, but it's also super abstract. So, so in order to understand it, I sort of had to dig a little bit, and we come across the next image, which, if we can just shift next. Yeah, so in the 1800s, like late 70s, late 1770s actually, there was an information sort of revolution that took place. The British went to Indonesia, and they went to the Malay Indonesia archipelago and Singaporean, those 3 countries, where they found this very specific latex that people were using to make knives, spoons, chairs, tables, whatever they were using. And that was the Sarawak community, which is who you see on screen here. And the British was they felt like they struck gold. I mean, they had. So they were able to extract it, caused one of the first ecological disasters at scale. You know, it was at scale, because they grew and felled almost 2.5 million trees at that point within the archipelago. They're tiny countries, no, land mass is not that big. So what they were able to do was to harvest the gum of this tree, which is the Gutta Percha tree. And one of the most important parts of this latex is that on minimal heating, it solidifies, and it is waterproof and pressure proof and weatherproof. So they were able to encase copper cables and put them underwater on the seabed so that the electric telegraph could be laid and could make the world smaller, right? So you're able to communicate across their colonies. They were able to send messages in Morse and in other kinds of code to their, I don't know, wherever they were fighting and wherever they needed. The British were, I mean, their whole thing was administration, right? So they had to be good administrators. So the next image actually shows you the copper lining and the GP that was, yeah. So the insulation, you see copper conductor, Gutta Percha insulation, and then they have a whole bunch of stuff that allows them to go underneath. So without this GP, they could not have laid the electric telegraph cables. And if you go to the next image, it also, so it was not just this. So at that point, they were able to, they started using GP for everything, from making golf balls to making binoculars to making, I don't know, just about anything they wanted to make, because it was so such a potent material. Actually, this image, yeah. So this image is actually super interesting because it allows you to, it was this mechanism that allowed people to speak from outside of a building to a room inside of the building, which is an extreme, this is a project in itself, you know, to understand how communication, the layers of communication that take place through GP as a material. And it's one of the things we'll come back to later on, because it's literally a listening device. It holds within it the ability to carry voice, you know, to carry sound, to carry information, to become a conductor or a conduit of material over time, right? So you have GP that has been laid. Before I finish the sentence, we just go to the next image, because it will kind of cool to see that GP now is used in root canal treatment. So if you ever have a root canal and they need to remove the, what is it called? The spoilt nerve that hurts you, they remove the nerve and then they insert GP, your tooth heals, and then they remove the GP later on. And then they give filling after that. So, and it's one of the most important places where GP is used today. I mean, I think it's the most important place GP is used today. So across time, it's still used as it's a part of the listening spectrum, you know, of sound, of communication, of some kind of, it's a material of conduit. It still functions as a material conduit. And what did I want to say? Yes. So actually, if you just move ahead you'll see the next image, please. So this is actually my own tooth, which I put GP in because I had an extraction at some point. Yeah, and this is just, okay, we can go to the next one, which is, this is how they do it, right? I think it's one of the most, it's a very poignant sort of image to look at how is the human implicated in something that happened like 3 centuries ago, kind of thing. And how does it move a long time? So one of the most important parts, if you go to the next image, I think we'll get to, yeah, these set of images. So these are all images which I found in and around India, not even India, I mean Chennai, Tamil Nadu, where I'm from, where we have say objects of different kinds of intrigue. So this is supposed to be an object that, how do you say, shoos away ghosts. You know, you get it in these country medicine shops, and shells. The next image, please. And the next one is another one with a shell. Yeah. So, And the whole bunch of images which you saw in the show, which is from in and around Taiwan, Taipei, which Po Hao put together, because I couldn't send these images over there, or send these objects over there. And one of the reason we did this was to allow GP to retain its ability to be a material of communication and like a conduit. So the premise of this was now we sort of enter the fictional zone where you say that GP now is still lying under the seabed right next to the fiber optic cables, which are what we use now, fiber optics, which was discovered, plastic was discovered 100 years after they discovered GP. So exactly 100 years, in fact. So, so I'm losing my train of thought, but so the premise of the fictional element in this case was that if GP still remains there and is still in close proximity to the fiber optic cables, to the kind of actors, different kinds of actors that engage with the cables in some way or the other, we'll get to that, then perhaps GP is retaining its ability to be a conduit, because perhaps material can speak to material in ways that we do not yet understand. The other important aspect of it is the role of how we're going to sort of think about material. So if we go to the next image, the next one, this is a bit difficult. What is this image? Yeah. So when one of the important bits of this, I think, project of this work was to look at who are the actors that help tell the story of infrastructure, who do not make it to the fore of the telling of the story of infrastructure in a general manner. So you have, say, GP is one actor, you have Fish, who is another actor, and like that, actually, there are a few, but I'll just focus on the Fish for a minute before we jump into how do we look at fiction, what is material, why all these things come together. Fish have this gland, which you see here. It's called the ampullae of Lorenzini, because a guy called Lorenzini sort of discovered it, where they're able to detect electromagnetic spectrum from around them. They read signals, and they usually they use it in order to hunt prey. So if something is under the seabed, under the sand, they're able to sort of detect it based on the impulses that they read, and they go towards it, which is why they go towards the cables and bite them, because there is some amount of electromagnetic rays that are signals that are emanating from them. And this relationship between marine life and the cables is something that is very much I think overlooked and not really looked at in terms of what are the effects or what happens, what are the potentials here to help. Is there a way, if we were to look at these stories, it helps us understand how the cables function better, So say, for instance, you have, which actually I do not have here, which is like clams. At one point, they're in the work, maybe it's not that easy to determine, but there were I think 300,000 clams, which is part of one colony, was airlifted and sort of replaced in a different location in order to lay a cable. So that is already sort of, we don't know what exactly happens as a result of it, but it is a space from which you can begin thinking as to what could be the effects of that. And it's something worth studying, because this is critical infrastructure. This is not just any infrastructure, right? So it will change the way its environment sort of functions around it. And it is up to us to sort of bridge that, not even bridge that gap, but sort of help make that informative jump easy and more easy to understand, only because in in order to help, this is general understanding that in order to make something legible, or in order to affect something, to have some kind of policy change or some kind of long-lasting change in a particular space, you need to be able to see what happens. You need to be able to sort of determine what are the forces at play at a specific place. And I think these objects, with these actors, whether it's the Sarawak community, the GP, the fish, the clams, or whatever it is, these actors that don't make it to the fore have a very strong role to play in the way we understand critical infrastructure. What is the next image? Can we just go to the next image? This is the ampullae. This is the glands that they have.
Yeah.
And the next image, please. These are also, this is a, how do you say, like a photographic images. Yeah. And the next one. These are fish ear stones.
Oh.
So the ear stones kind of, that's the next step of the story kind of thing which I built up, which is that ear stones play a role in communication with, so ampullae speak to ear stones sort of help communicate to other sea animals as to what, maybe there's a clandestine movement taking place kind of thing. And I think that we'll come to that, but I think one of the most important things for me is to also constantly keep reiterating that we cannot continue to look at animals as animal in essence only, that they are not just beings that do not have, I don't want to use the word agency, but do not have an act, who are not making choices. And a lot of the work rests on the idea that these actors can make choices, and they will make choices, and these choices are something which we need to learn to be able to see. And that is what in the first video that you saw, which is about this guy saying the fish will return and they will do something, also rests on the idea that they are dead, yes, but the dead will return in order to do something which maybe the living cannot do. And I think that is where, for me, like a political potential lies in trying to retell these stories, or trying to understand how does fiction rest within the scientific fact, or within technological fact, or within infrastructural fact. So, yeah, can we just move ahead? The fish islands. Just the last bit before we can maybe jump into questions is so one of the important things which the last important thing I would stress on is, so when fish look up, right, they have this hemispherical circle that becomes an eye, these two huge blobular things. And this is where the fisheye lens that we use comes from. And that is big. I mean, they have this eye in order to reflect light off the retina, so they get the best amount of vision, given that water is opaque. Very often is opaque. It's not always opaque, but the deeper you go down, it's opaque. It becomes relatively more opaque. And one of the ways in which to use this fact for me was to sort of think about what does it mean to say look upwards and form a hemispherical view of what you see, and can that be a conceptual framework within which to frame what is this frame a potential, or frame the call to tell a story, or to frame the entire project. Can vision do something? Can altered vision do something? Because one of the most important things, whether it's the fish or the hemispherical view, or it's or the deep sea cables, whatever it is that gravity plays a huge part in this. Water changes the way we understand gravity. So, for instance, fish, the vision, I mean, for whether living or non, the whole bunch of living beings, their idea of vision changes depending on what the gravity sort of how their bodies understand gravity. So in order to look at what is grounding, or what does it mean to exit a space and to re-enter a space, I think there is a very strong potential to tell the story of looking upwards, looking through gravity, or looking from a space of grounding into ungrounding yourself. How do you think afresh? What does it mean to think afresh, or to tell a new story, or to tell any story? Is to find a way to unground oneself and to reground yourself into something else. And when it comes to, say, something like a political or economic framework, we need to find a better way, very simply, to live together. And I actually very sincerely believe that it is in telling different kinds of stories from different places and from different kinds of bodies and different spaces within which those bodies interact, whether it's extraplanetary or not. It could be anything, any story of this kind always comes back to human sociability in some way or the other. And I think that ability to come back to human sociability and alter it is where is a phenomenal quality. And to be able to tap into it, or to even think about it, or percolate as to what is this space, what can we do with it, is the most exciting thing I have ever come across in the last couple of years. So, and it's a huge, and I think it's a very large political endeavor, which we're all doing. We just doing it differently. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on what I'm doing. I don't know if I answered. Poha has a whole bunch of questions, I'm sure, but I don't know if there's anything I can help to say to sort of help make clearer what I have been saying.
Would you like to go through a bit of the examples that you mentioned about the India government part?
Yeah. Okay, that's a good idea.
I think
so.
In the page like 31, maybe.
Yeah. So this is a bit maybe hard to read because it looks tiny. I mean, maybe it's tiny for me and not
Maybe
for
we
you.
could like enlarge a bit in the left up corner. So we could ask Ting if you could like make it bigger a bit. The cosmic press release. So it's an official release, right?
Yeah. So this is something I'm working on at the moment. It is the last page of the pamphlet which we printed for the show in the Sense Building. But this is what I'm currently working on. I'm trying to expand on this. But it's a very curious situation that took place in India in 2022, where this is peak lockdown, towards the end of lockdown. And the 5G spectrum allocation was taking place in India. And one of the things that happened was that there was a press release, and they were coming up with the latest telecom bill, which is a bill for extreme surveillance. There's almost 99% surveillance kind of thing. And as a part of that, they were also auctioning 5G spectrum space. And so this minister, in order to explain to the rest of the country, what is this thing called the spectrum? What do we talk? What is this thing? It doesn't even make sense. What is the spectrum? Because it's too abstract. It doesn't make sense for the average person. Unless you're studying it, you don't know what it is. Unless you know the terms, So he looked at, what he was able to do was to, I'll just read this bit out and then explain what these terms are. So spectrum is a valuable and inexhaustible natural resource. And this is a part of the bill, right? It's an explainer, a joinder to the bill that is tabled in Parliament, which is an inextinguishable natural resource, which is an element of public good. Therefore, it is vital to ensure efficient use and management of spectrum. In a way, spectrum is similar to Atma. Atma means soul, which is Ajar, that is eternally open, Amar, which means eternally youthful, as described in the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is one of the how do you say, it's one of those texts which the right-wing government just always jumps to in any given moment. It's a song of God that's written over here. It translates the song of God, and it's a political part. It's a political weapon, right? And it's mythological. So, like Atma, spectrum too does not have any physical form, yet it is omnipresent. And Atma here means soul. So, what this guy has done is he's likened the concept, the object. Okay, spectrum now becomes an object, and it has been prescribed the gravity and the materiality of a soul, which is abstract in itself, which is very, very, very abstract in itself, which cannot be grasped, it is intangible. And in making this shift, what has happened is that spectrum now becomes a concrete sort of object, and Atma now becomes like a kind of soul. He kind of shifts things, kind of makes this very, I think, ingenious play with materiality, with object, with abstraction and its concrete and its corresponding concrete. And so then he continues, this is from a press release that happened later on, where he continues as to what is spectrum kind of thing. And one of the most important things that that can be inferred from this is that, yes, spectrum is now is parallel to the soul, but this soul, which is spectrum, will be serviced only by the nation state, which is the current government that we have in place. And we will allocate it, reallocate it, and we will determine its policy and its shape based on what we think is the best for you. And this, I think, it's sinister, it's extremely sinister, but it's top-class storytelling. And it is something which, for me, is, I keep going back to this because it's nothing short of a masterstroke in trying to make infrastructure a mythology, which the assumption is that people understand mythology and storytelling, and you will not understand infrastructure. Infrastructure is not meant to be understood. Stories are meant to be understood. Yes. So, and I think there is a very interesting play here in it's not in terms of how to ape, not in terms of aping it, but learning from it, learning from how do you flip something? How do you make a story worth spreading? How do you spread something? How do you spread an understanding? Or how do you spread ideology? And this is exactly how you do it, right? You're able to make concrete and you make abstract, and you make it governance. It's not just an object of fun. It is fun. It's great. It's a mind-boggling bunch of sentences, but it's governance at the end of it, and it's network governance. So it's just an example as to what is at stake with good storytelling.
Nice. Okay. Is Bohal has anything just to adding it on?
Yeah, before we going on to discuss the work on display in this exhibition, I saw one audience asked questions about the ghost card video. So you can also see the question in the chat room.
Yeah, I think Aarti has already noticed the question a bit, but yeah. But I'm also like, I don't know if the audience, Chen, CHEN, is still there. Yeah. Do you feel that the answer is clear enough? Because Yeah, sure.
I wonder if I could chime in to sort of explain a bit my previous question and maybe add a new one, perhaps.
Yes, perfect.
Please.
So the reason that, thank you so much for this wonderful artwork and presentation. And I'm a grad student from Taiwan, and I'm also working on the colonial histories of information infrastructures across the Asia-Pacific region, so including like what you did, undersea cables, data centers, so on and so forth. So I do relate a lot to what you just shared. And the reason that I raised that previous question is because I feel like one major strand in current scholarship on labor and digital infrastructure focuses so much on labor exploitation to the extent that it becomes even more difficult for us to think about the kind of resistance and alternative, say, epistemology formed by these subaltern workers. So for me, your work really stands out in this sense precisely because in one of the previous clips, you draw our attention to the uncontrolled part of MTurk. And I wonder if this uncontrollability is a specific form of labor consciousness that emerged among your interviewees, or it's something that more like your own critical intervention to proffer us something different to think about. And if I could add my new question to the table,
Sure.
I really appreciate your artwork on undersea cable, in part because you keenly capture how this digital infrastructure intersects with environmental history and non-human actors that is so rare in the existing scholarship and art world. But at the same time, I'm also wondering how our journey of exploring these lost histories often has to sort of follow the already existing colonial circuits. So like the British colonial expansion across India, South Asia, Southeast Asia, to gather these natural resources and sort of the trade networks that help disseminate these natural goods. We still hope to call attention to the potential of the coloniality, perhaps. But I sometimes wonder if following colonial circuits, which is almost like a mandatory method, would actually reinforce these kind of colonial legacies. So I guess my question is whether you also relate to such colonial burden, and if your attention to gutta percha and fish might sort of be an alternative way to unsettle that colonial legacies and memories. I'm sorry if that's too sketchy.
No.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, first of all, for the questions. I'm going to try my best to answer it. But I think I'll answer the second one first because it's fresher. I can go back to that one later on. I don't think, I don't think my intention is to uncover any kind of colonial legacy, to be honest, because it's not about uncovering, it's there. It's just a question of sort of putting it together, which I guess maybe is a form of uncovering. But I think the more, and I think I understand, maybe if I'm reading it wrong, but what you're saying wrong, but if I'm reading it right, I do understand the pitfalls in following the trajectory of relying on already existing information, which often helps reiterate a particular narrative, of how history has formed, and maybe we don't have new ways to look into the past. And I don't disagree with it, but I think one of the things is that, I'm sure you know that media is laid on media, right? There is no media is independent of something else. So you have postal services, people used to walk along those lines. Then suddenly they said, okay, maybe we can send post along these lines. Then we start selling telegrams along these lines. Then we say, okay, fine, we're going to build railroads along the same lines. We're going to have telephone cables along the same lines. then we have internet is now, right? So the whole, it follows a very strong material trajectory, which starts with, how do I get from village A to village B? Somebody in the middle of, I don't know, nowhere in some 3,000 years ago wanted to walk from A to B, right? And from there, we follow I'm not saying we follow the exact same line, but there is a line that is being drawn from there to now. And that is a very material line. And the moment you get into history, you're going to get into colonial history. There is, unfortunately, it's very hard to not sort of go there, because that is the history of the world. And I think what can be done, I think, is when you try, which is why I think actually fiction really helps, which is like the most exciting thing, is because at some point you stop and you say, okay, fine, we have all these facts now, and we're going to interpret these facts in particular ways. And that is my prerogative. That's that is the person who is, say, the helm of the researchers at the helm is making these interpretive choices. And at one point, the researcher says, okay, fine, or the artist, whoever it is, says that, okay, we have all these bunch of facts, I've interpreted it in this particular way. And now when I construct the story, I will choose certain frictions, and I will choose certain sort of threads to tie together, and that will tell the new story. And I think in having these multiple kinds of ways of telling is when, over time, hopefully, that you kind of find new ways to read into the past and new ways to potentially have that affect how you tell the future story. I mean, not a story of the future, maybe that as well, but how to project a potential for the future that you want to work towards. Because why look at the past? Because you want to do something that's better ahead of you, right? So I don't know that answers your question, or at least tries to.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you so much. I do relate a lot to sort of how colonial history is where we have to go to sort of at least try to rebuild the world that might look differently as it were before, but I think the attention to infrastructure is super interesting, because I feel like infrastructure is something that sort of cuts through and but also at the same time transcend colonial circuits. Because if we look at the production of Gata Percha, it's not only the British Empire that's going after for these natural resources, but also Japanese and American empires. So it actually cuts through a lot of sort of overlapping empires and their history. So I think that's very helpful to think more about. Thank you so much.
Thank you. But actually, this is something you can really speak a lot about, because there's a lot to uncover in this. Just in this one object, like you take an example of an object like Gutta Percha, and then you suddenly have the history of the world in your hand, for a second, and you're like, how am I supposed to undo this kind of knot, or what are the potentials from which we can, what is at stake when we try to undo this knot, kind of thing. And I think that's something which, even now, I mean, there's so much of strife in different parts of the world, and the importance of going back, and going back and looking at where did this line get drawn, who was sitting where, who allowed who to go and migrate where, and this, that, and the other really changes. You're right. I mean, it's crucial. It's 100% crucial to retell these stories. But let me also get back to your earlier question, which was control. I think, one of the things is that I don't think any one entity, whether it's a whether it's a company, whether it's management, whether it's upper management, whether whoever the user is, whatever vision the user has towards a particular interface, because different users see interfaces differently. If you're a worker, you see something differently. If you are a person who gives out a job, you see the interface differently. If you're management, you see the interface differently. So whichever part of the spectrum you lie on, I really don't, I don't think anyone has a holistic idea of what exactly is taking place in terms of the having a completely transparent view of a space like MTurk, or a space that is so layered and so sort of opaque in every way possible. This is actually a phenomenal, I don't know if you've heard of this, it's called, I'm going to put in the chat, it's called Anatomy of AI, of an AI machine. Anatomy of an AI. Anatomy of an AI system. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen it. It's like super famous, and it actually kind of speaks to your question a lot, which basically shows the reader, shows you that it's very hard to determine where something is coming from, or what is is there a holistic way of understanding an object? So they've taken Alexa and they're trying to understand Alexa as an object, and they have discovered that it's virtually impossible. And they try to do it, they do it very well. But there's this one moment in this text where they write saying, they asked some CEO of a company to determine for sure that there is no child labor involved in the production of Alexa, Alexa, and it took them 6 years to determine that one particular batch did not have any component of it, was not manufactured by any child sitting in any part of the world. And it took them 6 years to speak of a batch that was like some ancient batch, So that is the level of opacity that we're working with today. And actually, I think uncontrolled becomes like a very meta word in that sense, because uncontrolled in this situation is of the app. They're talking about the platform, but they're also talking about people. They're talking about the weather. They're talking about what is the nature of the job. There is no recourse. It's an extremely meta word that can be it's uncontrolled, off uncontrolled itself. It's I don't know, nothing short of a mess as far as I can see. But it's interesting to see that it's interesting to see that there's no way to determine exactly what is the nature and the scale of uncontrolled or control, which is why it's easier. It's not easier, but which is why it's becomes so important to jump into, okay, who is getting exploited where? Because the moment you don't know what's happening, like it's like saying if something is really, if you buy something that's super cheap, you know that somebody's not getting paid somewhere, like that's it's immediately the first thing that comes to your head. Who's not getting paid? Somebody. You have to find out who that somebody is, and hopefully pay that kind of thing. I don't know if that answers your question again.
I don't know. Yeah, I could add on this question a bit, because I'm also interested in what Chen has been asking. So maybe yeah. According to the text he leaves in the chat box, I mean he's kind of curious about the resources, or like how these, like the man voice to talk about the MTurk thing, about the weather thing. So maybe he's trying to ask if the content of the voice is coming from one of your interviewee, or you make this up as a part of storytelling technique. So I'm adding on this. So for me, this part of the question is quite interesting for me. Is the question from me is actually, I would like to stress more thing about the ethic, probably the ethic on storytelling. Because sometimes you interview a lot of people, sometimes you read a lot of material, a lot of knowledge from like other humans or other non-humans, and sometimes you want to make some stories for them, but it's kind of, for me, it's kind of thing which is quite related to ethic problem. So I'm kind of also want to ask you how do you deal with this kind of of issue to tell stories from somebody else?
Yeah. So yeah, that's a good question, because I have to constantly negotiate that, which is and it's case to case. There is no one way of doing it. It's always case to case. So for instance, in the first story, in the first video that you saw, again it was like this guy, he told us, I feel like I'm the fish, and then he stops there, and you're like, and you feel like I cannot let that story stop, because I was very, very physically moved. It was very tragic for me. And I found that the only way that I could feel, also maybe that's a very selfish thing, but the only way I could feel better about having heard that was to say that there is potential in this now. We have to find the potential in this. And to construct that potential then becomes my job as a person who has heard the story and now has walked off, and I'm like, oh shit, what do I do with this now? Information that I have. And he's happy. He's not happy, but he's gone on with his life. I spoke to this girl, whatever she went, I went, I'm going home now, whatever. He's left. And so that maybe was a very selfish thing, which is that I cannot let that lie dormant, kind of thing. With this MTech work, the scale of ethic changes completely, because you're working with people who are meant to be hidden. You're working with people you're talking to people who are scared to talk to you, talking to people who are like, why do you want to know all this information? Who are you? And of course I had to explain everything, but I think one of the ways to do it is to respect the job, kind of thing, and say that this is a job. You talk to me for 1 hour, I will pay you the rate which I make an hour, and I will pay that to you as a person who is talking to me. And I think that respect, when you respect somebody's time and a job, and respect what they bring to the table, kind of thing, and you give it as much importance as you would give yourself, in terms of you're also doing a job, they're also doing a job, you're both getting paid. I think that helps. Doesn't even out anything. It doesn't make a level playing ground at all. There's no way. But what it does do is allow for it eases the situation in terms of they don't feel like they're being extracted in that sense, because they're getting paid a fair amount for their time. And that is something which it's the only way in which you can take this ahead. Because what are the repercussions? Very realistically, there is no policy change that I am going to affect by making this video. It's not going to have that kind of long-lasting change. And you have to be very certain that you're not going to change the world in this 20 minutes, So what is the first thing that actually helps? Pay them for their time. And then that really makes a huge difference.
Let's see.
But it is a constant negotiation. You constantly have to. So after I did the edit, I had to take it back. One guy said, you're making me sound very negative. So I had to delete that. And he re-recorded and he said, actually I feel like this. And then I had to insert. So it's a constant back and forth until everybody says, okay, fine, no problem. Go ahead, publish. I said, okay.
Wow.
Yeah. I think Aarti has already answered most of questions I raised before the talk. So if anyone have questions or things you want to discuss, please ask now. And
ask now or forever be silent. No, you can ask. You can also ask me later.
There are two accomplishment, like two of the audience really trying to address their likeness of your work. Yeah.
Thank you. I saw that. Thank you very much. I'm just going to write my email ID in case you think of something later on, or you don't feel like asking here. You can ask me privately.
Nice. So is any other question, comments, or feedback? Or maybe Bohao can share a bit about any of your thoughts during today's event.
Yeah, so I I saw how Aarti made those projects. Like
Yes.
yeah, and that's a different attitude to technology, because you can imagine at MIT there are many professionals. They are very good in different kind of like AI or anything. Or yeah,
True.
Aarti has very different approach compared
Yeah.
with. But I think that's more like it expand the discussion and the concern to how we can deal with those technology and also infrastructure. And yeah, so I really enjoy what Aarti shared today. And yeah, and I also want to thanks to everyone who joined this session, and we hope this session has inspired new thought and discussion. So what I need to say, I will always say, like, if you haven't, please visit the exhibition on weekdays at our technology building, so you can see those physical objects Aarti mentioned with Uta Petra and those things we collect in Taiwan. And also you are welcome to join us in future events. There is one another event, so with Rasa and Righties, it's also me and Aarti's friend. Actually, they are our professors at MIT. So we're presenting a project based on a radio telescope also from Cold War. So there is a like Soviet radio telescope in Latvia, and they 3D scan this radio telescope, and they also discussed about like radio, like spectrum, and also the sensing, like the sensory perception. So please join us in July, and yeah, and maybe Aarti or Devi to elaborate more on something.
Yeah, what Bohao is mentioning is about the 4 upcoming other public events in the exhibition, and the exhibition itself is ending in October 10th, I believe. So you still got a lot of chance to go there to see, and it is really, really lovely to have Aarti with us today. And I'm also appreciate that Aarti like give us the access to the little booklet that we could see on exhibition, and she's providing the online version, so that which I send to you guys to the audience through the pre-event email. I think that would make a lot of help for you to get more deep into the work itself. Also, Aarti leave her email if. And I also think the website she's building up in the web is quite clear, and the work and the concern that she's making is quite rich in that website. So I recommend everyone to see a bit. So if you have any question, you could contact me, Aarti, or like through with Bohao's team. So maybe that's would be the end of the event. And thanks everyone for joining, and hope you have a lovely day and lovely afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Aarti.
you. I just want to say thanks for having me and listening to me. And yeah, please write to me, and yes, I'll be very happy to respond.
Is Gigi would like to talk? There's a raising hand, or not?
I forgot to say, Aarti sent me books. So if you want to buy Aarti's books,
okay,
platform, you can also contact us.
Cool.
About the one from the platform from Singapore, Borneo.
Yeah,
I see.
It would Bohao. Yeah, please, if you're interested, you can contact Bohao.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Okay, goodbye.
Bye.